Easy stuff first, your name and your position here, please.
Yeah, my name is Jeff Halstead, Halstead, and I'm the Chief of Police with the Fort Worth Police Department.
Chief Halstead, let's talk a little bit about just kind of the policies and procedures when you're talking about officers pulling people over on the road for any sort of traffic violation. What is usually the norm?
Well, clarify, off or on duty?
Let's
Two
do
different
both.
norms.
Let's do
Okay.
both. So let's do, first of all, on duty, and then we'll do off duty, and yeah, see if we can figure that out.
On duty, it's very clear and it's very easy for the public to understand. Fully marked police unit, that is our standard police vehicles with the overhead lights and the emblems and the decals, and then a notification siren for them to pull over safely, so then uniformed officers can go ahead and conduct their traffic stop, the investigation, the inquiry as to a possible violation. But very standard and procedural, but when it's an on-duty contact, it's very easy for the public to understand and identify that this is a police officer and I should pull over.
I know there are probably some there are some circumstances when it comes to off-duty officers also pulling people over. Let's talk about, first of all, is that possible? Can officers do that?
Well, if you are in an unmarked vehicle and you do not have any uniform or any kind of easily identifiable uniform on, then we prohibit that, because we and the public would not know, are you a police officer? Because we get many complaints, and I know that the media also does stories on people posing as police officers trying to pull over persons for reasons unknown. So we prohibit that type of like plainclothes traffic stops. Now, if a police officer is totally off duty and they're with their family, and let's say they're going out to dinner and they observe something that's a very serious violation, we expect them to do just like a citizen. Call into our non-emergency number, have a fully uniformed and a fully marked vehicle conduct the traffic enforcement. We do know there are times when maybe an undercover officer working a specific detail that they really should not make the traffic stop and they're on duty, or it could be an off-duty officer that sees someone that's wanted. Many times we have a lot of these billboards and we have a lot of these be on the lookout type notifications, so that some of our officers off duty may see someone that's wanted by law enforcement. We still would rather them not make the traffic stop themselves. It's a very high liability position for that employee to be in. We do not expect them to take that kind of enforcement action while they are off duty and out of uniform, and we really want to leave that to those on-duty professionals.
So let's talk about Sergeant Leary's situation.
Yeah.
It looked like he was driving into work.
Yes.
He was in a uniform. However, is it common for officers to pull people over in their personal vehicles? In his case, Toyota Corolla, no lights, no sirens, no nothing. But he was wearing a uniform.
Right. That is very unlikely, and it's something that we do not support. But we need to be fair to the story about what happened before he decided to take this type of action. He noticed multiple moving violations that he clearly described in his communication to me personally, that this was some of the worst driving behaviors he has seen in 18 years of doing this job. So he thought this person was either having some kind of a medical emergency, a personal emergency, and he just did not know if they needed any assistance, and or why was this person driving so erratically, causing almost multiple collisions and or other drivers to avert, to get out of their way, and then he lost sight of the driver. And it was at a later time going down the freeway when he saw the driver again, and he almost had a collision with that driver. He thought, in his best interest, he needed to contact this person and at least tell them, I'm a police officer, please watch your driving, and that was his reason for trying to motion them to move over.
And that probably sounds a little bit more legitimate. However, listening to the 911 phone call and Sergeant Leary's interaction with Mrs. Bullock's, that doesn't sound the way most officers probably deal with people that they're pulling over for traffic violations.
Yeah, I think, the one thing that is very, very clear is everything seems to make sense until there is personal contact. And even Sergeant Leary explained that is the point in time he wishes he could take back. He wants to apologize to Mrs. Bullock. He knew he was in the wrong from the point of personal contact. And in his words, he thought he was too aggressive in his communication with Mrs. Bullock, and she was visibly upset, and that's what makes him feel so bad.
You've heard the 911 call.
Yes.
Hearing it for the first time, what were your thoughts?
I think it was a little bit embarrassed, quite honestly, because we did not know what was going on at the time. I really did want to thank our call taker at the time, because the clear communication and the directions were exactly what we would want them to say. Do not pull over for anyone. It doesn't matter if you think they are a police officer, if they're not in a fully marked police vehicle, get off the freeway, go to a safe location. And actually, I think the call taker was trying to direct them to one of our police sectors, which is the best advice they can give. But like I said, at that point of contact, that's where the actions were, in my opinion, unprofessional and needing an apology to Mrs. Bullock.
As you're listening to the phone conversation, you know, it's pretty clear at one point he does tell her that she is under arrest. Is that usually the way the process goes when you pull someone over to give them a ticket? Or was that where it kind of got out of hand?
Yeah, that's the part, I believe, where Sergeant Leary was truly apologetic in his words to me, and we had a conversation about this a few weeks ago. He knew in 18 years this is the only time where something, in his words, were it got under my skin. He felt that he lost control of the conversation and he was unprofessional. And those are the types of statements he wanted to apologize for and simply say he was sorry. He also wanted to meet with Mrs. Bullock and explain in person how sorry he was, because this kind of contact is by no means anything we would ever tolerate as an organization. And it is not the manner in which we treat our citizens. So Sergeant Leary's desire to apologize to her in person, I think that's needed without a doubt, but for the public, they need to know this is not the way we behave, and this clearly is something we won't tolerate.
I know you mentioned that Sergeant Leary has been very clear that this is one of the few times, or if the only time, that he has really kind of, something like this has gotten under his skin. But we got a hold of his civil service file, and it doesn't seem like that's the case. He had a 16-year-old that, you know, threw a paper at him, which you shouldn't do to a police officer. It is disrespectful.
Right.
He then in turn, though, arrests that 16-year-old girl, and he got suspended for it.
Yeah, and keeping in mind that in the 18-year career, you are going to have individual, I guess, incidents where you try to take a learning approach or a smaller discipline level to correct that behavior, because the 1,000 upon 1,000 of contacts, most of them under high stress and high duress situations, we know our employees that sometimes are going to make bad judgment decisions. This one, when I was talking to Sergeant Leary, this was the first time in 18 years off duty that he made this kind of unprofessional contact, and that's what he was sincerely apologizing for.
As you're looking at his case, and I know that this, it sounds like it's still under investigation
Yes,
through IA, what could happen? Where do you go from here? What is the process for him? And knowing that it sounds like he is apologetic for what he's done, he realizes that this may not have been the right thing to do.
He knows for a fact this was not the right thing to do. He is not making excuses, but he could not access his radio without detaching his seatbelt because of a new attachment and antenna design, so he did not want to take off his seatbelt. He was going to call in what we request for on-duty assistance to conduct the traffic stop, but he could not free himself and get that radio out, and his phone was out of reach. So he just tried to do what he thought at the time would have been the best alternative, and it might have been, but that point of contact turned it into a very, very unprofessional situation. Now going forward, this is something that is peculiar because we have a discipline guidelines that have been organized within the organization. Over 2,000 employees. We try to set up like a code or a standard of conduct. This would be one of those unprofessional type contact situations where we strive to the employee, you are going to attend training, you're going to also probably offer a written, if not an in-person apology, but this is a type of behavior we want to take corrective action, not necessarily a higher discipline level, but I do look at every similar situation within the last 5 years, because in trends of policing that shows repetitive contact where they're not changing their behaviors. Now if he had something very, very severe more than 5 years ago, it could affect my decision what I decide on for discipline.
Mrs. Bullocks remembers, and I think you can hear it in the phone conversation, that there are two officers uniformed and in marked cars that do show up probably halfway through the incident. And initially she thinks that those officers are there to kind of calm the situation down, and that's not exactly what happens. So where did did they go wrong? Did they follow also the proper procedure? Because I know it sounds like those officers were officers versus Sergeant Leary, who is a sergeant.
Yeah, they didn't take any rank intimidation or any kind of direction from Sergeant Leary. They did what we would have done in an off-duty context situation. Got the information from our employee that witnessed a traffic violation and or any other incident, and then they started their investigation into the traffic violation. None of those employees, and from what I've heard from internal affairs as well as their chain of command, the on-duty officers did nothing that violated policy in their contact and the handling of this incident. But I think when they arrived, they understood that at some point this was probably a little more volatile than what they heard over the radio, so they were just trying to get the facts of exactly what occurred.
Mrs. Bullocks obviously is still very upset about it. So much so, obviously, she did come to us and wanted to talk about the situation. She wants to see Sergeant Leary fired. Is that a possibility here?
No, it's not, because let's say that I decided to fire him for this contact. He would easily win his job back in arbitration, and now I'm going to have not just a very, very bitter employee, but I might now have laid down a foundation for future conduct. I have to be responsible for that. So what we have done since we created the discipline guidelines, we have greatly reduced our serious misconduct, and the majority of our misconduct now is training or a documentation with their supervisor or a written reprimand. So the majority of our violations are very, very low discipline levels. But understanding the traumatic experience that Mrs. Bullocks had, I could see if this was a family member of mine and they felt that way, they would probably want that employee fired as well. But we have to be consistent in application of policies and procedures. We have to do a thorough investigation into any and every type of misconduct. Then all of those facts are reviewed through, well, with Sergeant Leary's case, 5 levels of chain of command for recommendation for discipline.
As you're looking at the situation, I mean, obviously that the phone call is probably what is, the most surprising, and I think probably people in town will think the same thing. How does this impact your relationship with the community, and does it?
Yes, it does. In fact, this is why I wanted to talk to you personally, is because we take our relationship with the public and the public's level of trust with us as our greatest investment in our profession. And we know in a 24/7 operation dealing with high liability and very, very serious public safety matters that our employees will make mistakes. So we always want to get in front of these types of stories, and we take immediate corrective action to sustain that public trust and continue building those relationships. And then as a side note, we continue to have increased dialogue with many, many of our community support partners. So we have a multiculturalism committee, we have community liaisons that work directly in the Chief's Office of Administration, and anytime we have these types of incidents where we know it's going to hurt some of our relationships or maybe challenge some of our abilities to build future relationships, we openly meet with all of them so that we can talk to them about these are our policies, these are our procedures, and these are our expectations where we hold all employees accountable.
It sounds like this call was a little bit of a motivating factor for you. You sent a letter over to the municipal court and asked that the 30 tickets that she received that day be dismissed.
Yes.
Why do that?
Yeah, I communicated with the chain of command on this type of incident. These tickets I did not feel were issued in the appropriate venue where traffic enforcement should be taken. And also, I didn't want to set a tolerance level for our employees acting in this capacity in an off-duty capacity. I really wanted to make sure the communication was clear. Be a witness in your off-duty behaviors. I do not want them getting hands-on type of enforcement, because we have seen in the past, and we have seen with this incident, that those can quickly escalate, and the community is very misunderstood about who is a police officer and who is not. My decision is, do not take these types of enforcement measures. Communicate with the professionals. That's why we have them out there. Let them do their jobs.
All right, Chief, I know Jack probably is going to chime in. You have a couple questions?
Yeah, and just look at her, I'm not here.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
When was the first time he called for assistance?
Jack, I have to review the tape, but let me answer the question. I think the first time that Officer Leary, there was some communication on his radio, but it was closer to them actually coming to a stop. So I believe they exited the freeway. At no time did he have the opportunity to reach back into his gear bag for his cell phone. So I think it had to be a time when he got off the freeway and at a speed could release his radio from its attachment on his gun belt, and then he called in for assistance.
And then the reason why he didn't call in earlier was because he didn't want to take off his seatbelt and reach in for his...
Well, considering the speed of the traffic and how he was trying to pay attention to the vehicle movement as well as the other lanes of traffic, and then he noticed to his left a police officer with the emergency lights on, and he was trying to clear to stay within the law to give that lane of clearance. All of these activities going on at the same time, there was no way he wanted to divert his attention from safe driving and safe maneuvering to trying to free his radio. So he decided it would just be better to make a in-person notification through his vehicle and then try to get this driver to move over. If that makes sense. Okay.
You had mentioned that he told you that there were serious traffic violations that caught his attention to begin with. This is the first we've heard about any serious traffic violations. What were they?
Yeah, in the memorandum that he gave to me, and he wrote it directly to me and sent it via email, because when I promoted Chris and when I promote every employee in this organization, I explained to them the high standards of professionalism as well as the accountability measure I will hold them to. So Sergeant Leary actually communicated directly to me and gave me a clear memorandum of what occurred. And in that memorandum, it explains through his rear view mirror and a side view mirror, he saw this one particular vehicle doing excessive lane change and described it kind of as an aggressive driving behavior. He explained 3 to 4 instances where other drivers had to take evasive action in order to avoid this driver. And then he later noticed this was a female driver on a cell phone, and this was before he had made contact with the driver. So we're unaware of what the conversation was and or what circumstances were causing this driver to change lanes like that. In Sergeant Leary's opinion, in his memorandum, he thought they were just trying to get around traffic.
That memorandum, though, is different from the information that he gave on the police reports, though. It seems like he didn't mention that until later.
Yeah, and I don't know if, and I did not read the police report, so I didn't compare one or the two, but I did forward the memorandum I have to internal affairs. We always do a comparative analysis, and we always direct employees to put their actions and their observations in written format. Later on, we then conduct the in-person interviews and try to clear up any discrepancies. Keeping in mind, it is a normal physical reaction and memory retention to start recalling more things as time goes on. Just like victims of a violent crime. The day of the interview, an hour after a violent crime, you won't remember all the details as you will 4 days or maybe 7 days later. Things start becoming a little more clear. We've seen this numerous times with some misconduct investigations.
You say that Officer Leary has wanted to apologize personally to her. Has he reached out to her, and has there been a response?
Well, no, while he's under investigation, it would be, especially considering the unprofessional conduct they had at the traffic stop, I feel it would be very inappropriate for him to reach out on his own. In fact, if I was Mrs. Bullock, I would never want to hear from this officer again. But hopefully we can find a neutral third party where we can reach out and we can actually have a very positive meeting so she can understand it was absolutely nothing personal that day, and our employee wants to wholeheartedly apologize for his unprofessional conduct.
We asked what she felt like now when she's driving and she sees a police officer in the rearview mirror. It really upset her, and she says she still gets very upset. Does that worry you that you got someone out there who no longer respects police and actually is afraid of the police?
Well, that's one of the primary reasons that we would like to sit down with her so we can talk about this and actually have a very positive conversation. We have had not only use of force cases, but very high-profile police incidents where family members, relatives, and other persons in the community really don't want to have anything to do with us anymore. And it's not until we actually reach out, extend that olive branch, and start building a new relationship that they then come back into a partnership with us and understand more the circumstances that occurred prior to the contact. So hopefully, once we can have a conversation with her and apologize, I think she will understand that this was an isolated incident and by no means would depict the professional service delivery of all of our law enforcement officers across the state.
Obviously, you know, talking to her, she talks about seeing the Toyota Corolla in her rearview mirror and her side mirror, and she's heard the stories of there being police officer impersonators. Do you fault her for not stopping?
Not at all. In fact, I'm so glad she called 911 and made that contact, because that's exactly the same information we give out at all of our community and public safety forums. We know, and there are cases that are run not only in the media but as criminal investigations, there are police and public safety impersonators across North Texas as well as the state. And we really have to be cautious and educate and continue to educate our public. Always contact 911 if you think this person pulling you over is either an unmarked vehicle or you don't think they're a police officer. Follow your gut instinct and let us direct you to a very safe place where then on-duty uniformed personnel can make contact with you. So she did exactly what she needed to do.
Will there be any change in police policy given what happened that day?
Yeah, we're reviewing that policy by an independent group that's not involved in the internal investigation review or the chain of command, and we are going to review all of those off-duty traffic enforcement type policies and procedures, as well as those like some that are considered going to and from work. We know there are times in a police officer's career that something happened during their shift. Lo and behold, 30 minutes later on their way home, they see a suspect vehicle or someone else that they were looking for their entire shift. We want to make sure the clear communication is not only easy to understand, but it's also retrained to our employees so we do not have a repeat incident.
Good. I think